Furnari.
And I'm Keith DeCandido. Guess what? It's not a rerun. We're here with an all-new episode of The Chronic Rift.
Yes, today we're coming to you live from our studio for a very special episode of The Chronic Rift.
This episode we're dedicating to teachers, students, and the ideal of educating our youth.
Of course, this being The Chronic Rift, we're going to take it from the science and fantasy perspective. What can the genre add to the teaching experience and learning experience in the classroom? Today, you can even call in with your questions and comments.
That's later on. We're also going to take calls just with general comments about the show a little later. But first, some news. Last year, the Fox network canceled the science fiction series Alien Nation because the show's poor ratings were too low to justify the high cost of each episode. However, the fans of the series are trying to get the show back on the air with a letter writing and petition campaign, which is being organized out of Massachusetts. Similar things were done with Star Trek and Beauty and the Beast. If you want to get this Aliens in Our Midst show back on the air, write to the Massachusetts supporters of Alien Nation, care of Ursula Boyle, 15 Forest Street, apartment 148, Medford, Massachusetts, 02155. Or you can call Ursula directly at 617-396-7972. And you don't have to live in Massachusetts to be part of it.
Our book note this week is The Norby Chronicles by Janet and Isaac Asimov. Norby is a mixed-up sort of a robot who allows young Jeff Wells to buy him as a teaching robot. Norby and Jeff get into all sorts of space and time screw-ups, and that's as easy as the plot gets. The writing is very quick-paced, lots of plot, very little introspection as to who the characters are, but that's okay. I say for the budding fan, I mean the 11 to 13-year variety, the ones that like the visuals of Nintendo, you know who you are. This is picture perfect. Of course, the picture includes anti-gravity cars and transmat beams, but it's a picture. Okay, the only thing I didn't like about it was the fact that the Asimovs constantly, putting the book down, constantly repeat past information about the book. But then I said to myself, Jude, it's a book for the younger, inexperienced reader, okay, and I think they'll like it. The book is available through A Science Fiction and through the Trope Book Clubs for $2.95.
Okay, one more time, the Roundtable Awards. You have 17 days left while you can still vote. We need viewers to vote in the Roundtable Awards. Please write to us. Also, you can write to us and order a catalog. We are selling videotapes of past episodes and a T-shirt, which you should see on your screen any second now. There it is. You can order this T-shirt, which looks so lovely, for us for the princely sum of $12. And you can order past episodes. And you can vote in the Roundtable Awards. In any case, write to the Chronic Rift at 33 Highland Avenue, Yonkers, New York, 10705, or send us a fax at 212-463-6890. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
I didn't say it.
No, she didn't.
Dark Shadows, that gothic soap opera about a vampire, has returned to NBC and was heralded by a 4-hour TV movie. The first part was on last night, and the finish-off is tonight at 9 p.m. on NBC. The series itself will premiere Friday night, 9 p.m., after Quantum Leap.
And speaking of Isaac Asimov, well, actually, I wasn't speaking of Isaac Asimov. She was speaking of Isaac Asimov, but what the hell? Isaac, what the hell? Slow down a little bit. I mean, after all, Garfield has wished you a happy birthday in his own strip. What more could you ask for? Anyway, this week's Colmini Watch is twofold. First off, the character that he plays on Star Trek The Next Generation, Chief O'Brien, was married and the episode aired this past weekend. It was called Data's Day. And you may have recognized his wife, Rosalind Chow. She was the one who played Sun Lee on MASH, the woman Max Klinger married in the final episode. We also found out from an informed source that before he joined the cast of The Next Generation, Mimi was in a Broadway play called Breaking the Code. And, do we have any phone calls yet? Anybody? No? Yes?
Bueller?
No? All right. We were hoping we had a phone call. Nobody seems to want to talk to us. We've been on the air since mid-August, and nobody wants to talk to us. Fine. Anyway, in the last 10 to 15 years or so, popular culture has finally become a legitimate field of study in academia. In the literature field, this means that genre literature, mystery novels, pulp stories, comic books, and, of course, fantasy and science fiction, have now become acceptable things to study in schools, colleges, and universities. However, FNSF is in a better position to be studied in schools because there's a large portion of it that is meant for children and young adults. There's a tremendous amount of this stuff published for younger people, written by everyone from well-known adult authors like Ursula K. Le Guin and the aforementioned Isaac Asimov, to young adult specialists like Jane Yolen and Madeleine L'Engle. With Judy and me to discuss the ins and outs of teaching this stuff to younger audiences are, on my left, Dave Grate, who has been both student and teacher and is presently working as a student teacher, appropriately enough. On the other side of Judy, we've got Paula Araya, who is the Riff's makeup artist and also a longtime student, also wearer of our t-shirt. And all the way on my right is Bruce Coville, who has been a teacher in the past and is also now an author, with such books as My Teacher is an Alien and The Monster's Ring to his credit. And if you want to call with comments during the roundtable, give us a call. The number's 212-247-8090. You should see it on the bottom of your screen. Bruce, when you were a teacher, did you experience any resistance from the higher-ups to putting certain fantasy and science fiction books on the reading list because they were fantasy and science fiction?
I had no problem with it, Keith, when I was teaching. I've been out of the classroom for about 7 years now, and there's a problem that's growing, that's afoot in the country right now, which is that there's a fundamentalist reaction against any kind of fantasy or science fiction. I speak in about 50 schools a year right now, and I would say in a third of the schools I go into now, there is one or a small group of parents who protest the fact that I'm coming in because they consider anything with any imagination satanic. I've been surprised at the things I've been called in the last year.
Really? Yeah, I suppose a lot of young adult literature is fantasy oriented. There's a lot more of it that's fantasy, and there's I remember one author, Jane Yolen, was talking recently about how fantasy encourages witchcraft. You know, it teaches kids how to cast spells or something.
Well, what Jane was actually saying was that this is not what fantasy literature does, but
No.
what some misinformed folks would like to think that it does, whereas in reality it has nothing to do with that. So I see that as a really growing problem within the schools right now, and teachers who are not feeling very solid, teachers who are feeling threatened in their position, are not going to teach a book if it's going to be a problem for them in that way. So we may be backing up a little bit, because I didn't have any of this problem 10 years ago, but I see it's a problem now.
David, do you have any problems now that you're preparing to student teach?
Actually, no, I don't. I've seen one of the teachers that I've observed in the last semester actually does incorporate science fiction in the classroom, where she will read a science fiction story, about a 4 or 5 page science fiction story, and then she has the students write another story using the same characters, or in other cases, completing stories of fantasies or, you know, science fiction tales. And matter of fact, in one case, which is semi-fantasy, which is The Lady or the Tiger, where it takes place in ye olden days, and the teacher reads the story, and the story ends. Which door does the man open? And she wants the students to react exactly how he what would happen the second that door opened.
That's very interesting. When I did my student teaching last year, my cooperating teacher, although she was a very lovely lady, said, "Well, you know, science fiction and fantasy, that's kid stuff. They do that down in the junior high. This is 10th grade you're teaching now. You know, teach them real literature." And I was like, "Wait." I said, why isn't it real literature, I asked her. She goes, "Oh, because it's about cars flying." And I said, "So you see the visuals and you don't see what's behind it." I said, "There's lots of, for example, what comes into my mind is Philip K. Dick's novel, Why Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which has been turned into the movie Blade Runner." People read Orwell, they don't read him in a classroom. And I find, especially with all the environmental issues that are hot these days, he's very environmental. It always rains because they've destroyed the environment. There are serious human questions that go on in that book, serious questions about religion, there's symbols, everything. But because it's set in the future, because there are a few cars that float, because it's not part of the canon, it's kid stuff. I find that kids read a lot. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English, and they like to read. But then when the teacher starts putting books down on them that they don't like, a lot of teachers don't care what the kids like to read, and they don't pick up on what they like. And once they get to the 9th grade, they don't trust the teacher anymore to like it. And it's like, if you want kids to read, why not tune into what they want or what they like to get them in that club?
That can be a problem. I mean, I remember freshman year of high school, our teacher, you were in that class, our teacher had us...
I wasn't in your freshman
No, that's
class.
right. The teacher wanted us to do a paper on a book that we wanted to do it on. And I was the only one in the class who picked a science fiction book, and a lot of people thought I was like, what are you, crazy? You can't do a paper on a science fiction book. But the teacher was willing at least to give it a shot. But he knew nothing about the book, he knew nothing about the genre. It's like English teachers aren't supposed to know about that stuff. Yeah.
I've always found that when a science fiction book is brought into the classroom, it's not, they don't go into it as fully as they do, like, The Grapes of Wrath or something at classic.
Mm-hmm.
They take it and say, oh, here's something to read. When you're done with it, if you like it, we might do another one. But only if you like it. Well, not even, maybe. It's just something that they don't really bother with. It's kind of like, it's on the side, and they use it only if it's absolutely necessary, only if they have nothing else.
Like, we need to fill up the space.
Yeah.
You're still in high school?
Yes, I'm a senior.
Through your experience, do you trust the books or enjoy a lot of the books that your teachers give you to read in English class?
I find some of them are really disappointing, but on the other hand, there are just as many that are really interesting, that really are worthwhile.
Do you read on your own?
Very much.
What kind of
That
books
helps.
do you like to read?
Science fiction and fantasy.
Okay, good.
Good answer,
Sure.
good answer.
Yeah.
The books that you like, that you do like, that your teachers herald upon you, do you find elements of science fiction, fantasy in them that tune you into them? Or what is it that hooks you into the books that they give you that you like?
Well, often there's a character that I can identify with, or there's something that is surreal about it. Something, not exactly science fiction, but something that could be.
Mhm.
Something that makes you think there's a chance that they might have been trying, but they didn't want to go too far.
Too far. Can you think of an? I hate to put you on the spot, but can you? You're on the spot. Can you think of an example?
Macbeth, with the ghosts and all that.
Yeah, that
The
bugs
witches.
me. I mean, Hamlet, Macbeth, that's like that's fantasy. That's ghost
Yeah.
Perfectly
stories.
legitimate science
Okay,
fiction.
but you know, someone named William Shakespeare wrote it, so it's acceptable. You know, Arthur Conan Doyle passed the 9th grade. No, you can't do that. Okay, then good. Oh, sorry.
I think you see an increasing level of snobbery as you go up the academic ladder. Elementary teachers are perfectly comfortable using lots of fantasy and science fiction with their kids, although few of them use science fiction. In high school, it becomes a bit of a problem. In college, you actually reach the point where college instructors or professors who write science fiction will do it under a pseudonym so their colleagues don't know and they don't get in trouble in their academic circles. There really is more and more of this kind of attitude as you go up the academic ladder.
Yeah, unless you get really high up the academic ladder, then you get popular culture professors who like have degrees in it, therefore they know all the ins and outs of it. But that's sort of like a clique.
And it's a
It
very
becomes
new
after
kind of
that.
situation too. And part of that is the basic, we remain a very Puritan culture. So the fact that science fiction is perceived as people as fun means it can't be good for you, and therefore isn't suitable for use in schools. Literature is only good for you. You see this sort of attitude some teachers have. Literature is only good for you if it's painful.
Nobody's called in yet. This is ridiculous. It's a live show, folks. Call us, will you?
Call.
But
New York fans are
weird.
lame.
That too.
But
I'm sorry. Did you?
I was just about
Go
to
ahead.
say, Greek mythology, which is fantasy, is acceptable because it comes from the Western culture, and you study Perseus and all those other neat guys, and that's acceptable. But if you take other kinds of mythology and want to reintroduce it, again, it's like, well, this isn't the acceptable one, this isn't what we study, then no.
I find that untrue. I'm taking a course, mythology as a matter of fact, and they bring in many different types of mythology, African,
Really?
yes,
That's rare.
I'm
Greek,
impressed.
Roman, Celtic. We even have studied the Bible, certain stories in the Bible.
As mythology?
As
They actually
mythology.
admit that the Bible is mythology?
As mythology,
All right.
yes. Well, you can't exactly prove that some of this happened, so it's a myth.
Right.
We've studied After the Fall by Arthur Miller. We're taking the character Maggie as Marilyn Monroe,
Mm-hmm.
and we're studying a lot about that. mythology is taught in the school, and it's recently become much more popular, and they're trying to get the kids to want to learn, so why not make it fun?
There's I mentioned there's a lot that's published, and you've written a lot of it. When you're writing a YA novel, a young adult novel, what do you have in mind usually? Is there anything that's particularly different about writing a fantasy book or a science fiction book for a younger audience than it would be for writing for an adult?
There's two things basically, Keith. You tend to have a younger hero. Kids like to read about people older than themselves, but younger than the adult audience usually likes. And you are relatively less graphic. You keep out explicit sex and deep violence. Beyond that, then you run a constant battle with the editors. I'm constantly trying to get stuff put back in that's been taken out because they're afraid they're going to offend somebody, somewhere. And it becomes an ongoing issue. Can I put this in? There's so much, again, to go back to the censorship issue I mentioned earlier, I find that now I actually have to fight not to pre-censor myself. And if I find that these people have no business being in my head, maybe, should I put this sentence down? So I tend to put a sentence in if it occurs to me, and I think it may be a problem, simply because I'm so adamant about not having any of this kind of censorship go on. Beyond that, pace is a very important issue for kids. The story needs to, I think it's partly an artifact of the television generation and of the world we live in general. Novels, all contemporary novels, proceed much faster than novels written 50, 100, 150 years ago. And that's more true for kids. I write largely, I'm perceived to some extent as a boys writer, and there's not a lot of us around. I'm a writer that 5th and 6th grade boys will read. To do that, you really have to grab the kid by the throat in the first paragraph. I have a little sign over my desk that says this: grab the reader by the throat in the first paragraph, sink your thumbs into his windpipe in the next, and hold him against the wall for the last line. Now, that's not always possible, but I describe the act of writing for me as working in a constant state of fear, because I know the kids that I'm working toward are used to 15-minute segments. They're used to coming back after the commercial. And I know that when they close the book, if I don't have them hooked, that I might not get them back because they got family, friends, schoolwork, and the television all distracting them. So you really have to have, the pace can vary, but you've got to have their interest at a high pitch all the way through.
And it's funny because you were mentioning before about visual, how the Asimov book is very visual, and that's something that fantasy and science fiction has an advantage over, because it's something that is removed from our regular experience, and that's what appeals to them in something like Nintendo or a cartoon, because a lot of cartoons are really fantasy and science fiction stories that they watch anyhow. So that's something that they can relate to, because fantasy is a completely different world. It's like going somewhere else that has a completely new set of rules. Science fiction, in a way, is a new world also, because you're dealing with changes in the future. And they usually try to relate it to your own experience, so it's something that you can relate to.
Kids constantly wonder about what's it going to be like in the future. They can write about it, have them write about it.
Teachers assign that as an assignment all the time. It's like, in the year 2000, what will you be doing?
Yeah.
Or what will the world be like in the year 2010?
I hate to bring Asimov up again, but he's great. He wrote a short story called whatever.
Yeah.
He wrote The Fun They Had, which is about teachers, what type of teachers there'll be in the future. And we went on for 3 days debating about which is better, computerized or a real teacher, and how would kids learn better. And it brought up such constant debate. Well, how far can we progress before machines take over teachers for 3 days with the 7th grade class? And they're a tough audience. Okay? They have their own opinions, and they love arguing with you back and forth. Because I always say, nothing can replace me. And they're like, yeah, right. And they always wonder. They love to wonder.
I think that's the, we have a call? Oh, we don't have a call. We should have a call. We want a call. Somebody call us, damn it. The number's right there on the screen. It's 247-8090. Please call us. We're begging you, please.
It isn't one of those things that costs like $1 or $2.
No, it's a normal local call, for crying out loud. You won't even show up on your phone
David,
bill.
you're just going to start your student teaching in February. What advice did they tell you? What grade are you going to be teaching first?
I'm going to be teaching 2 10th grade classes in Kennedy High School in the Bronx. And the 2 things they told me was, 1, don't smile, and 2, keep discipline. Don't do something that's going to necessarily be a broad range. Keep them in control. And the first thing I said was, but I don't want to keep them in control. I want them to think. Yeah. And so one of the things that I wanted to, that I'm going to be using as a book in the classroom is the books written by Simon Hawke, the time travel books. They're called the Time Wars Saga. There are 11 or 12 of them now, and they start off taking place in the 27th century, and the characters in them, 3 main characters, go back in time, and instead of actually going into actual historical events, they go into books. In the first book, called the Ivanhoe Gambit, they go into the book Ivanhoe and also the book Robin Hood. And they
that could also be a great way to hook them into
exactly.
classics. You get them interested in things, like, you want to know more about this, and here's this book.
Here's the book. Right. And then the second one is the Scarlet. It goes into the Scarlet Pimpernel, and a whole bunch of stuff. And one that I especially appreciated, which was I think the 7th book. I don't know the title. Is it takes place in Victorian England, where you've got Arthur Conan Doyle, you've got Bram Stoker, you've got H.G. Wells, you've got a whole bunch of a gentleman named Dr. Moreau, and it intertwines a whole bunch of different science fiction topics. And on that one, I'm going to try to order 4 or 5 copies, just because I like that book, and it's just you can do so much with it.
Get them to read Conan Doyle after
I'm going to get them, if a student say does the Ivanhoe Gambit, I'm going to put up 11, sets of the 11 books, and I'm going to say, here, pick a book. Okay, if they pick the Ivanhoe Gambit, I will then say, okay, use the Ivanhoe Gambit, read that, write me a little tale about it. Now, I want you to read this. And I'll hand them Ivanhoe, or I'll hand them Robin Hood, or I'll hand them something about King Richard I, which is in the Ivanhoe Gambit, and I'll just say, okay, tell me about this. Tell me what you've learned. Tell me the differences. And while there aren't that many differences, there are quite a few. And they can have a lot of fun with it, and meanwhile, learn about English history.
I think that's the important thing, is the idea that they will be having fun when they read it. Not enough teachers that I've experienced at the high school level and at the grammar school level are willing to think that the kids having fun is important. It's like, you're not supposed to have fun, you're supposed to read great literature, and this is great literature, and just the teachers
And it's great because I told you it's great.
Yeah, right, that doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't give anybody any reason why they should read it. If you give them something that they'll enjoy, then they'll be more willing to talk about symbolism, they'll be more willing to talk about imagery, even if they don't realize they're talking about imagery and symbolism, because it's something that they like doing.
And when they do it, say, hey, by the way, guess what you should always, because that's what they want you to, they want them to learn how to critically think. That's the big thing. Yeah. And you don't say, okay, now a symbol is this. That's the wrong way of getting to it. But once you start talking about things, you go back and you tell them, this is what we've been doing. And hey, you've learned a skill. Yeah. One thing I found with my students is they love history.
Really?
My junior high. And whenever I'm doing something thematically with the social studies teacher, they're taking a tour throughout the world with social studies. So every time we hit a different part of the world, I bring in the mythology for them. And they love it, and they eat it up, and they trust me. And that's something that I think is very important, is to get the kids to trust you. And I said, Miss Furnari, we're studying Rome now, what have you got? I was like, Rome? No problem. I said, you want to hear...
Just don't give them Plutarch.
No, I bring in the mythology. This particular set likes mythology.
Mythology is very interesting, as long as you get a story that's not too above them, too hard for them to understand. It should catch them. It should really make them want to know more.
Especially Greek and Roman mythology. That's fun, because you've got all sorts of fun things going on.
Yeah.
Incest,
And another thing I hooked that we were doing Henry VIII, and I made this really inflated story about Henry VIII and him creating the church, and they wanted to know more about this crazy king. I said, well, and I found them I said, well, there's this guy named Shakespeare who had a lot to say about kings and queens everywhere.
Named Henry, too.
Yeah, and go for it. And they said, bring it in, and I'm constantly bringing them in books. If you share books with them, they'll trust you, and I think that's a problem.
If you just, not even the books, if you just share a particular experience in a book with them, you'll get them to want to read that particular book, which is, most teachers don't do that. Most teachers will just say, here's the book, I thought it was good. You'll think it's good. Ha.
And if you don't
mean,
think
if-
it's good, too
Yeah.
bad. You're wrong. I'm right because I'm the teacher.
Yeah. If you get the kids interested in it to begin with, just tell them a little bit about it and then just drop it, and like don't tell them any more. You'll catch them and you'll be like, okay, tell me more. They're like, and the teacher says no. You'll say, why not? Well, read the book, and it does catch them.
The other thing that makes Judy's tactic work, and you're absolutely right, is that a lot of teachers want to hide their human face. They are you were told to not smile, to keep
Yeah.
control from the
I was
classroom.
told not to smile until Christmas.
Yeah, that's an old, they really believe that. But what kids respond to is your human side. What catches them is the fact that you're a real person. And the best thing to teach from, I think, is your own passions. You've got a passion for science fiction, so you can do a spectacular job of teaching from that passion. And from science fiction, which is a literature that encompasses, it's the literature of ideas, it is the literature of ideas, you can lift their thoughts up and give them so much to chew on about the world, but it comes from what your particular interest is. That was why I used science fiction and fantasy when I was teaching, because it was what I loved to read. The best year I had as a teacher in the classroom, I had a group of very, very smart fourth graders, and I conned my school district into buying me multiple copies of the Lloyd Alexander Chronicles of Prydain, which is a 5-volume fantasy set. And because he dealt with increasingly complex thematic matter, the reading level of those books ranges from about 4 or 5, fourth grade, fifth month on the first book, to somewhere in the middle of the 8th grade reading level. But because the storytelling is so fantastic and kids are so caught up by them, they went straight through them, and we read straight through all 5 books, and that was, we threw
In
away
the
the days
4th
of
grade.
reader and read the books. It was great. It's the best year I ever had as a classroom teacher.
That's wonderful. That's really, that's if you can get them hooked in like that, because what you get when you get into a discussion like you were talking about before is really a wonderful experience.
And once you hook them, they'll be like, more, and then you can go back and give them what your administrator wants, the classics, but you have to
Right.
hook them first. Well, it's that magic time again.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Nobody called.
David, Bruce,
On all of
Paula,
you.
thank you very much. Thank you for watching.
And next week we're going back to the reruns. We will be back in March with the Roundtable Awards ceremony in mid-March. Please write in and vote. Please write in and vote. Anyway, join the physics club.
That's social. Demented and sad, but social.
See you in March, folks.
Bye.
Good night.